Hello, everyone in podcast land. Welcome to this week's episode. Today, we're giving you another Twitter update. Elon Musk is hiring again.
We talk about the new Lucid Air and its new Pure models.
And we're talking about PlayStation 6 leaks. We already have a release date for the next generation console. On to topic number 1, a Twitter update. So, before Elon Musk took over, Twitter had nearly 7,500 employees. Now, 3 weeks after his takeover, they've reduced down to 2,700, so about like 1/3 of what they had before. Recently, during an all-hands meeting at the start of last week on Monday, Twitter employees and Elon Musk met, and he said that the company's done with layoffs. They're actively recruiting for roles in both engineering and in sales, and actually, employees are encouraged to make referrals for people for them to hire. This is, I would say it's a bit of a turnaround, in my opinion. I mean, he's been clearing house for the past 3 weeks, as I said. He's drastically reduced the staff. I didn't think he would start hiring anytime soon, but it almost seems like, I mean, he was essentially just clearing house, right? He's going to make a lot of changes at Twitter. He's been pretty vocal about that. So I think these past few weeks have been him clearing house, getting a fresh start, essentially, a clean slate. And now he's going to build the company in the way he thinks it should be built, or he's going to take it in the direction that he thinks it should be built. I guess my question to you, are you surprised to hear that he is now done with layoffs? He's not going to, we're not going to see people leave by the hundreds or thousands anymore, and he is in fact hiring, or is this kind of on pace with what you expected from Elon?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised. There's the fact that he laid off so many people originally kind of surprised me as well. But the one thing where it kind of does make sense is from the very beginning, Elon didn't seem to have wasn't the biggest fan of at least the way that Twitter was made up in terms of its executive staff and a lot of its employees. And there was a lot of back and forth going around between the groups, specifically when Elon or when Musk was on the docket to actually purchase the company. And, mentioned it on this podcast in the past, I was always kind of hoping that there wasn't going to be a situation where he was just going to disregard employees' concerns and essentially kind of listen to them. But when a lot of those layoffs happened, it was clear, no, he wanted his vision of Twitter to be the only vision and not necessarily listening to any of the concerns that the employees or some of the users may have expressed at his potential idea of what he wanted Twitter to turn out to be. So the idea that, okay, no, he's done with getting rid of people and, gave a lot of people even an ultimatum. He fired half or laid off half and then gave a bunch of other people an ultimatum. It kind of cleared the house of people who maybe didn't want to agree with what he was doing or would maybe kind of fight back a bit. So it's kind of like a least resistance kind of thing. Okay, everyone who wasn't on my side is gone now. I can hire back people who are going to be fans of me and fans of what I'm doing and are going to carry out my vision, which makes sense. But overall, I still think that's kind of sad that it's being run that way. But overall, I think that makes sense for who he is and what he wants to do with the company. He kind of needs to have people on his side. So yeah, to that extent, I'm not super surprised. What I am a little bit surprised by is it's kind of hitting the ground running, right? Hiring a bunch of these people, and he's already made announcements, and potentially prematurely, who knows, but announcements of changes that he wants to see roll out in Twitter within the next week or so. So yeah, it's kind of things are moving at a breakneck pace. It's very different from the purchase, where things were moving so slowly. It seems like now things are just going to be moving at a really, really fast pace. Whether that's a good thing, I don't know. I'm kind of curious to hear your opinion on that, as to how the pace of this Twitter changeover is moving. Do you think it would have made more sense for him to take his time, for actually the whole company to take its time and kind of plan things out before making these announcements and making these decisions? Or do you maybe think like this is just the way you had to do it? You had to kind of just get rid of a bunch of people that weren't on board, bring in new people, and just kind of, go for the goal as quickly as possible of like what Twitter 2.0, as it's being coined, is going to be.
I think it would have been a better idea to take things a little bit slower, right? To try and figure out, okay, what direction does Elon want to take the company in? What direction is he going to take the company in? And then who on board is able to take Twitter in that direction, and then who wants to take Twitter in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
I think just the pace at which everything is moving, if you lay off that many people that quickly, I'm sure there are a lot of or I'm sure there are a lot of talented people that could have still been at Twitter, that would have liked to still have been at Twitter, that would have been able to help Twitter with a lot of the issues that they're going through right now and things that they're going through in the future. But just letting go of that many people so quickly before he even knows how Twitter functions, really, right?
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know how to run Twitter like a week into the business. He's just if you just fire half the staff, there are going to be some very good people that get caught up in that.
Yeah.
And yes, he didn't agree with the CFO and the CEO and the head of security and all that, and it's okay to not agree with them, but instead of firing them on the first day, he probably could have taken some time to because I'm sure they had valuable things that they could have taught him on how the company currently runs and how it can be run. But I think because he just wanted to come in and clear house right away, I think there's definitely a lot of good employees that caught up in the middle of that.
Yeah.
I I will say though that this is kind of typical Silicon Valley fashion, right? Like the motto is move fast and break things. That culture was supposed to be over, but it's definitely still clearly part of Elon's plan. He is moving very fast and things are breaking. And he's eventually going to fix them. He's going to, step some things back. But I mean, if this is his plan, this is his company, right? It's his $54 billion to spend how he sees fit. But I think it would have been a lot more strategic, and I think it would have been very beneficial for him to move a little bit slower and a little bit more calculated. But I think this is kind of typical Elon fashion, right? It seems like he's making a lot of decisions based off of emotion. Like he just didn't like Parag and the other executives. So first day in, I don't care what you have to teach me. I'm just gonna fire you guys. Or
Yeah.
maybe he thinks they can't teach him anything. So he's like, yeah, I already know everything. So see you guys later. I mean, one thing that he moved fast on and they've now stepped back is that whole paid verification fiasco. Right? I think paid verification was live for actually 2 days, 2 whole days. It seemed like a lot longer because I think the ramifications of the news, or I think the ramifications of all the fake accounts and all the fake tweets, whether it's the LeBron James or the pharmaceutical companies or other advertisers, on the platform. I think the ramifications lasted a lot longer than 2 days, which is why it seemed like it was longer than 2 days. But paid verifications are suspended right now. And they were supposed to be back up November 29th, which is in a few days from now. But Elon has also said, we're not going to push it out until we've fixed this bot problem with paid verifications.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one clear example of him moving fast, breaking something, and then now they're going back to fix it over again. So I think more of that will come, but I mean, he isn't able to fire, or I mean, he could definitely fire half the staff still, I guess, if he really wanted to. But I don't see that happening. I think now there's going to be, from this point on, I think there's going to be a slower, more focused direction of the company. And I mean, as you said before, I hope that the people who are there now are appreciated and they're not being asked to work, like 15-hour days over the holidays. And I think that's going to, I mean, I hope that's going to be part of the future for Twitter, but it's kind of hard to tell right now.
Yeah. I mean, the idea that maybe the pace could be slowing down, I don't know. Part of me thinks that might be wishful thinking because that would bring some stability. And you know what? I want to say you're absolutely right about the point of, just mass layoffs and stuff like that. That's kind of the norm for companies. Companies do that all the time. in the tech space, in the telecom space. It's just something that happens at, like you said, you would hope that kind of culture goes away at some point, but yeah, it's still very much a real thing. But in terms of like changes coming fast and furious from this Twitter 2.0, I mean, it feels like every day we're getting a different story. And two things that I've seen today were, the poll about unbanning a bunch of accounts that were suspended for misinformation and inciting violence and stuff like that. That's going to be overturned, and all those people are going to be allowed back under this Twitter 2.0, and I think effective immediately. And then another big one is the reintroduction of the Twitter Blue and verification system, where there's now going to be 3 verification statuses, where you're going to have a gold check mark for companies, gray check mark for governments, and blue for Twitter Blue subscribers, individuals who can essentially, and I think this is what we were talking about in the last podcast, which I think was kind of a good idea, who could potentially verify who they are. And I don't know if that's going to come out alongside of this new verification system, because they say it's supposed to launch within a week. But, that's the kind of plan. But then they're also saying that there's going to be a secondary kind of smaller logo that, let's say, for example, you are an individual with a blue check mark because you paid for Twitter Blue. You can also get a supplementary logo if you belong to another company. So, for example, you're Twitter Blue, but you also work for the Washington Post or something like that. You could potentially have a logo underneath that blue check mark to denote that, hey, you actually work with this company. So yeah, that could be interesting. I don't know if that solves the problems that the original.
Sounds like it just makes it worse.
Yeah, well,
it's gonna be very confusing.
That's the thing. I'm kind of curious of like, well, you already gave your opinion on this one, but like your opinion on this system, or what you think should be done to kind of make this a little bit more readable. Because I've said this, I think, not in the last podcast, but the podcast before. The cool thing about verification is that you could see at a glance that that person was the real person. The more check marks and logos you bring, yes, maybe eventually it can get to the point where at a glance you can tell who's who and what's what, but it definitely makes the whole website a lot less readable at a glance. And I would be kind of hoping for maybe just going back to, there's a one check mark and the blue check mark, because that's what people understand. And if you want to bring in another colored check mark for subscribers to a service, make that the different color or a different symbol altogether, so that hey, this person is a part of the service. And if part of that service also means that their identity is identified, then yeah, that can be something completely different. But I don't think that should at all coincide with the verification of, this is a person that as a public figure, whether it's an actor or a politician or a journalist or something like that, so that, these things don't get, or these people don't get impersonated. Yes. These people don't get impersonated. But yeah, I'm kind of curious. Do you think that this system could work in the long run, or do you think maybe it should just go back, or maybe a different system altogether?
I think the best thing to do would be to go back, but it's almost impossible now, or like too difficult to go back right now, because on multiple platforms, right? It's not just Twitter that had blue check mark. Like Instagram had blue check mark. YouTube has check marks. I think they used to be blue, but now they've changed them to just a monotone check mark. I'm pretty sure TikTok has blue check marks for verified accounts too. So it's like a blue check mark has been seen as a symbol of authenticity.
Yeah, it's
ubiquitous. And as I don't know. I don't want to sound too pretentious. I mean, I don't have any blue check marks. But it's almost, Twitter has almost tainted the idea of a blue check mark now, right? Because now there's that, does that really mean what I think it means? Because universally it was, a blue check mark means this is, some public figure or some company that has been verified. So I can believe what they tweet. Or I can believe that what they're tweeting is coming from who it says it's coming from.
Yeah.
not when LeBron James tweets that he wants to get traded from the Lakers, that it's coming from someone who's impersonating LeBron James. You see a check mark and you're like, okay, yeah, this is a verified public figure or celebrity.
Mhm.
On Twitter, that's been eroded. And so subsequently on other platforms, it's been a little bit eroded too. I think because on so many platforms, blue check marks are used as a verification. I think the best thing would be to go back to the old system on Twitter. But now on Twitter, people are still gonna have that like in the back of their mind. Is this actually LeBron James?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
is this someone impersonating LeBron James? I think they should introduce something completely different for Twitter Blue. I know it's kind of difficult because like Twitter Blue is the name. Just call it Twitter Gold then, for instance. So then you're paying money. People associate money, gold together. So Twitter Gold, you're a paid member, and that way a blue check mark is still a verification like it is on other platforms.
Yeah.
But now you can still, if you want to differentiate for whatever reason, people who pay and people who don't pay. It's not like on YouTube, you don't get like a check mark for YouTube Premium or something. Anyways,
Yeah.
I think the best practice to do would be to make a blue check mark a verification for public figures, for companies, for celebrities, for people whose identity has been verified like thoroughly, and then create something else for your Twitter Premium or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to do that. I mean, from what you said, they're going to do the opposite of that. And then the blue check mark is just going to be for people who paid for whatever reason. But yeah, that's what I think would be the best thing.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think the blue check mark should stay consistent and bring in something else. I don't even know why it has to be a check mark. It probably shouldn't be, just to avoid confusion. Bring
Yeah.
in
Like
another symbol.
like a
for people.
golden square or
Yeah.
something,
And
or a
then
diamond, so people don't get confused.
and that's the thing. Like the whole point of verification, I guess the kind of issue with verification in the previous Twitter was that it was hard for people to become verified. It was kind of very difficult to get in contact with Twitter and be like, hey, I need to be verified. It was very like hit and miss on who got to be verified and when. So if people who pay for this gold box, this gold square, get pushed to the front of the line for verification, to me that's perfectly fine, because then they can go to the process of getting that blue check mark and actually knowing that, oh, this person is who they say they are. But it shouldn't just be, okay, you pay money and you get a check mark no matter what color it is, because that's just confusing.
Now, part of this whole paying for check marks thing is they're trying to increase their revenue,
Mhm.
right? Like, yes, Elon's not going to make his $54 billion back, but they're trying to increase their revenue and they're trying to find new ways of increasing their revenue. Now, last year, apparently, 90% of the company's $5 billion in revenue came from advertising. 90%. That's essentially 100%. It's essentially all of their money came from advertising. So it makes sense that they're somehow trying to diversify.
Yeah.
I think that's partly why he threw out that $20 initially, because he's like, we really got to swing that percentage to something other than advertising.
Yeah.
But obviously, $20 was way too much for Twitter Premium or whatever they want to call it. But if you think, okay, 90% of their revenue advertising, more than a third of Twitter's top 100 clients haven't advertised on the platform since Elon took over. More than a third of their top 100.
Jeez.
Now, according to sources at the companies and according to advertising agencies, companies are under pressure from a range of stakeholders and customers about being connected with content that is being viewed as inflammatory. Elon wants to make Twitter a town hall where people are free to say whatever they want to say, but advertisers don't agree with everything that everyone wants to say
Yeah.
because they don't agree with it, one, and then also their customers might agree with it, which is two, right? So if Charmin wants to put out an ad on Twitter and I don't know, maybe there's someone I don't know, someone's saying something about the NRA or someone's saying about, bringing a gun to Walmart. on Twitter, and they're allowed to say that because you can say that on Twitter now. If Charmin doesn't want their ad being played next to that or shown next to that, they can't really. There's no real moderation to prevent that from happening,
Yeah.
which is risky for someone who's spending billions of dollars, or let's say millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on advertising. It's risky to say we can't guarantee what your ad is going to be played next to, right? So it makes sense that they're pulling their advertising. But it's not just a Twitter thing also, right? For this past year, for 2022, marketers have been pulling back on digital advertising all over the internet because, we're going through an R word, or we're going into a recession right now. So money is being pulled back from digital advertising. And because of all of the controversy that's surrounding Twitter and is on Twitter, they're pulling even more of their marketing back from Twitter. So if you think of 90% of that 5 billion, that's what, like $4.5 billion isn't going to be there, or will be drastically lower next year or for years to come. Yeah, I guess you got to start charging people more for check marks, or you got to find something to start charging people for.
Yeah.
So I guess my question to you, other than the $8 for Twitter Blue or Twitter Premium or Twitter, whatever they want to call it, what other ways do you think Twitter could make or could increase their revenue? Like what else, what other options do they have? Else do they have to offer people?
Uh, I think 100% it has to be paid Twitter accounts for one. So, for example, let's say, I'm a person who has a public Twitter. I also have a paid Twitter, and then Twitter takes a percentage of that paid tier of that Twitter account. And I think you should leave it up to that account creator to set a monthly fee for that account. And similar to what happens with Twitch, essentially. You subscribe to someone's Twitch channel, you get some emotes and stuff like that. If you send in a super chat, you can get like a highlighted text, essentially in the chat and stuff like that. So I would think that is something that Twitter should bring into the ecosystem. The ability for creators on Twitter to monetize their accounts, and then that monetization, which are going to be paid by their fans, Twitter can take a portion of that. I think that's a great idea. It's not going to make up for advertisers 100%, but what that does also allow is it allows for certain creators to maybe paywall some of their more controversial takes. So maybe that brings less of that stuff on the front page, which means advertisers can feel more comfortable having their advertisements on the front page. The other thing I would also say is, going back to this verification system, yeah, there could be the $8 a month fee for the gold box symbol that you get on your account. But I think there should also be a tier for whales, essentially. People who want to pay a lot of money. And I think this is where Musk can use his celebrity and his fandom to kind of advertise that the same way he did with, like we mentioned, the perfumes or the flamethrowers and stuff like that. Advertise a digital product, not an NFT, just like some kind of digital thing that you can get. Maybe it's like a banner on your Twitter profile or something like that. But that just costs a lot of money. Maybe it's like $50 a month or something like that. And maybe it has some kind of specific tie-in with Musk. Maybe he I don't know, sends out a tweet of all the people in this tier every month or something like that. Like, give an option for people who just have a lot of money to burn and are fans of either Twitter or are fans of Elon Musk to pay him. And I think maybe those 4 revenue streams combined: Twitter Blue, the whale Twitter tier, the monetization of creator accounts, and advertisements on potentially front pages or even pages that are less controversial, I think can maybe hopefully help the company be a little bit more successful in the long term, especially with a lower overhead in terms of employee count. But yeah, I don't know. Do you have any suggestions for what Twitter could do?
No, I agree with all of that. I think this streaming thing is a big deal too, right? Because one area that Twitter is pretty successful that I'd say they're unmatched right now is the audio live streaming,
Mm,
right? Like the whole, I mean, the Clubhouse clone, they ripped off Clubhouse and now it doesn't exist anymore.
yeah.
That is one thing that Twitter does very well. I don't use it that often, but if you add in a feature where you can, like you said, tip creators, if you want to be brought on stage, all right, yeah, it's $1 or 50 cents or whatever it is, or you want your tweet to show up on the stream, and there's some sort of payment for that, some sort of transaction where the creator gets some money and Twitter gets some money too. I think that could be a big revenue stream for them, especially depending on how much they lean into it. And right now, there's a few memos floating around, but it also seems like Elon wants to bring more creators onto the platform,
Hmm.
right? He wants to bring people who are big on YouTube, and he wants them to post their videos on Twitter. It seems like he's trying to lean more into video on Twitter right now. And I think I saw somewhere that he's actually promoting a 10% pay increase compared to what they get on YouTube.
Mm.
So, I mean, is it going to be as successful at surfacing creators or recommending creators to people? I mean, it's kind of hard to tell right now, but I could imagine, like you said, some big creators, some whales who are out there, like a Mr. Beast. If he knows that, hey, if I post a video on YouTube, on Twitter, and I'm gonna get 10% more per view on Twitter than I will on YouTube, that could be a pretty big incentive.
Yeah. Right. And our next topic of the podcast is electric cars and the brand new entrant into the electric car space. They've been around for a bit, but they're finally starting to get their mainstream cars rolling out to customers and being a little bit more mainstream. And that's the Lucid motor company. Lucid is a company very much like Tesla that's starting with this very high-end sedan that's supposed to kind of compete with the Tesla Model S on every level and kind of beat it in a lot of ways. It's faster. It's supposed to be nicer. It's this cool little vehicle that is supposed to be the flagship electric luxury sedan. So just to give a little bit of background around this vehicle. So originally the vehicle launched just over a year ago with the Dream model, the Lucid Air Dream. And that was sent out to like specific backers of people who backed the company early on. And it was their most expensive version of the car. And, they were shipping in very small quantities. But now what they've just announced is their new Lucid Air lineup, which consists of there's the Lucid Air Grand Touring, the Touring. So the Grand Touring would be like the middle tier. The base tier is one called Pure, which is their cheapest version, just under $100,000 or just under $90,000 starting. Then you go up to the Grand Touring, which has 1,050 horsepower, about 516 miles of range. And like I mentioned, the base model is the Pure, which has 480 horsepower and 410 miles of range. So the interesting thing about these numbers is the horsepower aside. Like these cars have versions like the Sapphire, which is their new flagship now, which has 1,200 plus horsepower. But the interesting thing about even the base model, the Pure Edition, is the range. 410 miles of projected range, which is much more than almost all the competitors. Now, to be clear, this isn't a cheap vehicle. It is very expensive, like I mentioned, just around the $90,000 mark. But yeah, it's kind of interesting that they're really trying to go for the range as their biggest selling feature. It's not necessarily, they have a very fast version with over 1,200 horsepower, which is more than the Tesla Model S Plaid. But that's not really what they're trying to advertise. They're trying to advertise the fact that, hey, this can go the farthest on an electric charge with our battery tech, which is kind of cool to see from a new company to kind of tackle the hardest part of making an electric car, which is the battery and the range, which we've seen a lot of companies struggle with. Companies like Ford and Hyundai have both struggled with the range kind of aspect. But I'm curious, like, looks are subjective and all that. Have you seen much about the Lucid Air lineup? Uh, what do you think of it visually? Do you think it's a cool looking car? And do you think they can actually compete with the Teslas out there?
I've seen a bit about it, and as you said, looks are subjective. I like how it looks.
Mm.
I think it looks good. I've heard not everyone is a fan of it. I like how it looks. I guess, do you like the look of the car, or what are your thoughts?
I pretty much like everything about the car except for the lipstick on the front. There's kind of like this two tone weirdness with the car where around the lights there's like a silverish trim,
Mm.
and it goes all the way around, and it looks like the car has lipstick, and I really don't like it. But other than that, I agree with you. I think the car looks great.
I guess aside from the lipstick, great looking car. I definitely think they can compete with Tesla, and I think they're going to compete with Tesla. And for the longest time, we've been talking about Tesla quality control issues and build issues and recalls that they have to do. I mean, just recently in the month of November, there's been about 400,000 Tesla models that have been recalled in the United States. That's a lot of cars.
Hmm.
That's a lot of cars to recall. But back to the Lucid. As you said, it has a better range, it has more horsepower. Its charging is actually faster. It has 350 kilowatts peak charging compared to the Model S's 250 kilowatt hours. It's more luxurious on the inside because Teslas essentially have a bare bones interior. Not to say, some people like it. That's nice, right? Some people prefer a minimalist interior, but when you look at how the chairs are put together, which is, crazy that you have to say that about $150,000 car, like how the chairs are put together, how the panels are put together, the materials that they use on the inside, the build quality is generally seen as better than Tesla.
Hmm.
And we've said that, when you look at the Mercedes, when you look at the Porsches, when you look at all these other legacy car manufacturers, they can make a better car than Tesla. But when it comes to, let's say, the range and when it comes to the drivability, maybe that's where Tesla has the edge on it. But as we said, this has more horsepower. This has, I believe, a faster 0 to 60 time, 0 to 60 miles, 0 to 100-kilometer time, and it drives exceptionally well. You said it was a little sedan earlier. It's the same wheelbase as a Tesla Model S, so it's not tiny,
Hmm.
but it's not like a Maybach, for
Yeah.
instance, right? It's a regular size sedan. It's not a smart car. Um, but because it has a bigger battery, it is considerably heavier. And most people would say that, okay, it's a heavier car, so maybe it's not going to drive as fast, or maybe it's not going to handle as well. But multiple people have said that this is a very nice car to drive. Not only is it, does it have all the X, Y, and Z in terms of luxurious interior, good range, good speeds for charging, good top speed, but it also handles very well too. Motor Trend, the car magazine blog, the car reviewing company, they've listed the Air as their best vehicle of 2022 already, or their best EV of 2022.
Hmm.
And when they talked about the drivability, they said that it drives surprisingly well. It's a big sedan that doesn't seem like it can drive as fast as it does. It's grippy with good handling. The Tesla is roughly 450 pounds lighter than the Lucid, but the Lucid feels as if it ought to be the other way around.
Hmm.
The nimbleness of this massive car, the response from the front end, and the feedback in the steering all makes it feel like a classic high performance sports sedan, not a big heavy EV with sticky tires. The Air Grand Touring is a new handling benchmark for EVs. This is the EV we've been asking automakers to build. That's some very high praise from a very well established car reviewing company, blog, magazine, whatever you want to call them,
Yeah.
right? And for the longest time on this podcast, at least, we've said that yes, let's say Porsche can make a nicer handling car and a better interior, but Tesla's going to have a faster speed and they're going to have a better range. We say yes, the Ford can make a better put together interior, but Tesla's still seen as like a luxury brand. And once again, it's a fast car that's very nice to drive. We said that, hey, at some point, someone's going to come along and they're going to put it together. They're going to have a luxurious car with a nice interior that handles well, that is fast, and has range. And now we have that in the Lucid Air. That may be a very expensive car. It's definitely not a cheap car, but it seems like, I mean, last year, the Mustang Mach E took the EV of the year because Tesla had so many shortcomings, right? They
Mhm.
had build quality issues. They had a ton of recalls, which brought it down from being the best EV out there. Even though when you ask people about, name an EV company, pretty much everyone's going to say Tesla. That's the first brand that comes to mind when you think about electric vehicles. But now we're at the point where, okay, the Mustang Mach E won last year. Now the Lucid Air is winning this year. Is Tesla even the premier electric vehicle company right now? Like, yeah, there may be more of them, but if you're someone who's interested in the range and how far you can drive without having to charge, if you're someone who's interested in the interior, if you're someone who's interested in handling, Tesla isn't the top of any of those right now. So it seems like there's more companies that come out, or more companies are coming out with cars that just toppled Tesla when it comes to making electric vehicles. So, I mean, they're playing catch up right now.
Yeah.
They had a head start for quite some time, but now Tesla has to play catch up to all these other vehicles. I'd say the number one thing that this EV, the Lucid Air, has over Tesla also is has an actual steering wheel.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a yoke. It doesn't have a square rectangle to steer. It just has a regular steering wheel with buttons, not capacitive buttons. It has, stalks for turning on your windshield wipers and your headlights. Not everything is a touch control on the screen. It has physical buttons and an actual round steering wheel. Yeah, they've made a good car. That's essentially it. They just take your idea of what a good car is, and they just made it into an EV, and they didn't have to reinvent the steering wheel like Tesla did.
Hmm.
So I'm very excited to see this. I'm also excited to see, you mentioned the Lucid Air Pure. I don't think it's out yet, right? It's coming out
It's coming out.
at
Yeah.
some point next year. I'm interested to see what their $90,000 car looks like. And I'm interested to see reviews from that too. Because if that also gets raving reviews, and it's like, all right, now this is something that can compete with, maybe the Model S or the Model Y. I think that's something that'd be really cool to see, especially considering how much praise this Lucid Air, the Gran Turismo, is getting.
And we have so much competition coming down the line. I mean, like a lot of what this car does right is a lot of what the Taycan did right.
Hmm.
In terms of build quality and speed and stuff like that. Like it was just a fantastic vehicle, but where it fell short was the range. Well, what happens when Porsche gets that dialed in? Like, does
Yeah.
that now become the best electric car, especially in the more luxury market, especially because the base model Taycan and the base model uh, uh, Lucid are practically the same price. I'm pretty sure that's what they were aiming for when they designed it. But then we also have something like the Ioniq 6 coming out, which people are starting to get in their hands, even though it's not coming out until pretty late next year. And people are raving about it. They're loving it. And that's a more affordable vehicle, more along the price of something like a Tesla Model 3. And, that's doing really well. So it's really interesting to see, like, as this space becomes more and more competitive, if Tesla is going to try to use the gimmicks like the yoke to stay relevant, or are they going to actually go back to what they did and revolutionize the car market? But then again, it also comes down to the point, same thing we were talking about with Twitter. It's got Elon Musk behind it, right? There's going to be a fan base regardless. And once that Cybertruck comes out, I know people don't think it's going to happen, but once it comes
I don't
out,
think it's gonna happen.
I imagine that's going to take the world by storm. That kind of annoys me a little bit because I don't necessarily think there's anything about that vehicle that shows that it's the right, well-designed electric car. But
Hmm.
the reality is it got people excited. And yeah, maybe that's what they need. Maybe once that vehicle comes out, they reclaim the crown, and they're, when that vehicle finally starts shipping out to companies, they're the best electric vehicle of that year. But who knows? I mean, we're gonna be. I'd say let's not hold our breath for that to happen, but it could.
Yeah, it definitely could. Do you think the Cybertruck will actually come out next year? I think that's what they're saying now. 2023 Cybertruck shipping to customers. Do you think by the end of 2023 people are going to have Cybertrucks?
I think by December, there's probably going to be 5 shipped out.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's going to be that big delivery day where they got a bunch of them lined up, and a couple of people can come and pick up their keys. But then the major rollout is probably going to happen somewhere in 2025. And once again, I don't think
2025. Whoa, that's like 2 years.
Yeah, well, okay. I think there's going to be, when I say major rollout, I mean like all models. Like 2024, I think we'll probably see a lot of the high-end models that they're starting with. But I don't think we see any of the lower-end models in 2024.
Okay.
I don't think we get like the full Cybertruck line until 2025. But like I said, I don't think that's all Tesla's fault. All car manufacturers are struggling with getting their vehicles out. It's very difficult to get a Ford F-150 Lightning. It's almost impossible to get the coolest vehicle ever made, the Hummer EV. So
I thought you were going to say the Rivian.
Oh, no, the Hummer EV is, man, that thing looks like it belongs in Destiny, driving on the moon. Like, that is just the coolest thing ever. But yeah, the Rivian too. And I think with Rivian and Lucid, it's kind of a little bit more difficult because they're new manufacturers. They're starting from the ground up. They're starting from nothing. And yeah, there's always the fear that they could pull a FTX and just disappear. I hope that doesn't happen, but there's always a fear of that happening.
We talked about this a bit before the podcast, before we started, but do you think Elon Musk is stretched too thin right now? Do you think he has too much attention on Twitter? He's not focused on, where his bread is buttered. He's not focused on Tesla.
I mean, honestly, my answer to that question is no, except for one big caveat. My answer to that question is no, because at the end of the day, I know this is the narrative, but at the end of the day, Elon Musk is not Tesla. Elon Musk is not Twitter. Elon Musk is not the Boring Company. There are very smart, talented people. SpaceX, yes. I'm pretty sure, there are tons of great astrophysicists working for SpaceX that know what they're doing, and they don't need Elon there looking over their shoulder. Where I think the caveat comes in is if decisions only get done if he vetoes them. And if that's the case, if he signs off on them. And if that's the case, I think that's just a really sad kind of situation. I mean, like I said, these are very smart people who work for very great companies. So the fact that a lot of these people have left these companies and started startups of their own, like Rivian, like Lucid, a lot of that expertise comes from people who worked with Elon Musk in Tesla. So yeah, it should not be an issue. It should be an issue where this guy is investing in a lot of these companies and is paying really, really smart people to do the work they know how to do. It should not be on his shoulders, quite frankly. And if it is a situation where it's spreading him too thin, I think that's more of an issue with how the companies are being run as opposed to how many things he's involved in. Mm-hmm. Personally, I don't know. But how about you? Do you think maybe he needs to focus back on Tesla?
I mean, that is a very good point that you bring up, right? Like, he's not designing the rockets, he's not designing the cars, he's not assembling the cars himself, he's not doing any of that. So he shouldn't be stretched too thin. But I guess my only thing is, like, yeah, if he's the one who has to sign off on everything, then there's definitely a problem with how the companies are organized. But then it's what has taken so long. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. If there is some issue, like I couldn't tell you when people put in pre-orders for Cybertrucks. I couldn't tell you when people put in orders for Roadsters, right? But the fact that they've been waiting for this long to get them, there's something definitely wrong with Tesla.
Good point, yeah.
Right? The fact that they haven't been able to deliver on these vehicles that people have put millions of dollars down for. So the fact that that problem hasn't been solved yet, and I mean, as much as he's not the one making decisions, he is the CEO of the company. He's the one running the company.
Yeah.
So the fact that his attention is somewhere else, trying to solve some other problem that he just decided he needs to fix, like, I think maybe you should. I don't know. Personally, I think maybe he should pay more attention to Tesla. How about, get the Cybertrucks out, then you can buy your social media company. But I mean, like you said, he's not the one. He shouldn't be the one making all the decisions. He shouldn't be the one assembling the trucks himself. So yeah, there's a lot of smart people. I asked you, do you think that Cybertrucks will get shipped out? 5? Okay, yeah. I was gonna say 1 will get shipped out by the end of the year, but I'll bump that up to 3. I said there'll be 3 people. I'd say MKBHD, assuming he put a down payment on one. I'd say Joe Rogan
Mm,
and either Kanye West or Donald Trump.
mm.
Although I don't think him and Donald Trump are on good terms right now, so throw it up to Kanye.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's a good point.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, but I will say I will look forward to the MKBHD video when he gets the final production version of the Cybertruck.
definitely. Okay, on to our final topic of the day: PlayStation 6 leaks. We already have a release date for the PlayStation 6 console. Now, thanks to documents from the United Kingdom's Competition Markets Authority, we have a rough time frame of when the Sony PlayStation 6 will be released. It's either going to be 2027 or 2028, which would give the PlayStation 5 a life cycle roughly of about 7 years. Now, the document has to do with the ongoing Microsoft Activision Blizzard merger investigation. And in the document, it says Microsoft has offered to continue making Activision games available on PlayStation consoles until 2027. By that time, the next generation will be coming out, and the lack of Call of Duty games will make them extremely vulnerable to consumer switching and a subsequent degradation of competitiveness. So, 2027, no Call of Duty. Hey, we're probably going to come out with a new console during 2027. It's going to hurt our sales. So, PlayStation 6 coming out 2027. Apparently, also today, so we're recording this on Friday. Apparently, today, there's a report that the Federal Trade Commission in the United States is going to file an antitrust lawsuit to prevent Microsoft's takeover of Activision Blizzard. So I guess my question to you, does 2027, 2028, roughly a 7-year life cycle for the PS5, does that fit with what your expectations were, for one? Do you agree with them that, hey, if there's no Call of Duty, if there's no Activision games, that is going to hurt sales for PlayStation 6? And 3, do you think that there will be some sort of blockage of this deal? Do you think that Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard is too big of a deal that there's no way that the FTC will let it happen?
Well, in terms of are we going to see a PlayStation 6 by 2027? I think maybe that could have been the original plan when the console generation launched, but I think it was just unforeseeable, like what kind of situation the console was going to launch in. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is another 10-year generation, much like the PS3 and the Xbox 360, which kind of launched in the midst of a global recession as well. But then also, I've been on this podcast and I've said I don't think the PlayStation 4, Xbox One generation lasted long enough. I think the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X came too soon. And I think you're starting to see a lot of that come from the fact that 90%, if not more, of games that come out are for Xbox One and PlayStation 4. There's very
Cross-gen.
yes, cross-gen. There's very few current gen specific games coming out, and pretty much all of them that I've seen that have come out, including games like Ratchet and Clank that people talk about, oh, you need the SSD. Honestly, I think all those games could have worked on last gen. So yeah, I don't think we're in a point where this generation is even 2 years in, it's not hitting its stride. It's still very much almost like it hasn't started. and I wouldn't be surprised if if it needs to last extra long, potentially even longer than the 10-year generation, for it to actually be a viable console generation. And I think that would be smart for this one to last a little bit longer. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see the PlayStation 6 by 2027 or 2028. I'd actually be surprised if we do see an announcement of that in the next 6 years. In terms of what would happen if Call of Duty is not a part of the PlayStation 6, would that affect the sales of the PlayStation 6? 100%. I don't understand why that's an argument for this deal to not go through. Like I've said this on the podcast in the past. I think PlayStation and Sony is being incredibly hypocritical, considering every generation since the PlayStation 4, well, I guess that's 2, since the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, they have been very serious about having exclusives. There's no Final Fantasy 7 on Xbox. There's no Final Fantasy 16 on Xbox. There is specific deals to get items in Destiny and Call of Duty exclusive to the PlayStation 4. This is just the way the industry works. It's about securing exclusives. And when Microsoft essentially tried to not do that with the Xbox One generation, the head of Xbox now, Phil Spencer, came out last generation and said, we don't think exclusives are good for video games. And what happened when they made that decision? They got destroyed. So now they're making a 180. They're like, okay, if you want to focus on exclusives, we're going to fight fire with fire. And the way they do that, by competing, is by purchasing companies like Activision Blizzard. Is this a huge, ridiculous purchase? Yes. But I think it's much more of a situation of necessary for competition in games, considering the amount of exclusives that PlayStation has put on their own platforms, or have paid for on their own platforms in the past few years, has made it very close to Xbox failing outright. Like, I don't think anyone would have been surprised if after the Xbox One generation, if they continued on that trajectory of just doing horribly in terms of console sales and game sales, if Microsoft just said, we're pulling out, no more video games for us. And it's now just PlayStation and Nintendo.
Really?
And I think what really saved them was that Bethesda deal. That Bethesda purchase gave people hope, because remember, it was announced before the Xbox Series consoles came out. And it was a huge part of Game Pass, of when they're saying, hey, all of our first-party games, including Bethesda games, once they made the purchase, once they announced the purchase, are going to be on Game Pass day and date. I think that got people once again interested in Xbox, where if that didn't happen, we probably wouldn't be seeing Xbox in the next few years. Or if we did, it would be a very different version of it. So yeah, I think this is incredibly hypocritical on PlayStation's part. But to their point, yes, Microsoft could do a lot of damage with all these exclusives. They would own all of the biggest first-person shooters, as Sony has said. They will own Call of Duty. They will own Overwatch. It's huge. That's a huge purchase. And can I see this deal getting blocked? I think I've said from day one. I don't know if maybe I could just be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure I thought there's a pretty good chance of this deal getting blocked. Simply for two reasons. One, Call of Duty is the biggest game, and Microsoft owning the biggest game I could imagine would be concerning for some people like the FTC, or even the European version of that's doing their investigation. But then also, this comes right off the backs of them purchasing Bethesda. And Bethesda was already a gigantic deal that blew everyone's minds. The fact that they could step it up to, I mean, it's not even 11 at this point, it's like 30. Step it up to such a high degree directly after that, with very little break between those two, I could imagine it could be concerning. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this deal does get blocked. I think Microsoft could potentially recover from that. I would like to see them, if it does get blocked, to maybe fight fire with fire, and maybe go after a Japanese studio, something like a Capcom or a Square Enix, which is a much smaller company than Activision Blizzard. But that would be going directly at Sony for kind of blocking this deal. And maybe that's just a little petty on my point, by my part, but I think that would be a cool move for them to be like, okay, fine. We'll go after the stuff that you care about then, in terms of your JRPGs and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I don't think they'll do that. I think once this gets blocked, they'll just kind of double down on their first party studios and try to go from there and maybe lay low for a bit. But I don't know. Do you think this deal will eventually go through? And do you think we'll actually see a PlayStation 6 in the next few years?
I don't think we'll see this deal go through.
Hmm.
But like you said, I think it'll get blocked, and I think Microsoft will go after someone else. I could see them going. I don't know if it's even possible. Maybe going after someone within Activision and Blizzard. Maybe they just go for Overwatch. Then it's like, all right, we can't have all of Activision Blizzard, but we're gonna buy this one gaming studio that's responsible for this one, this one IP.
Hmm.
I could see them doing something like that. Or like you said, maybe going after a Japanese brand like a Capcom or like a Square Enix. I can see them doing something like that. Do I think there will be a console? I mean, after 7 years is pretty quick. And like you said, a lot of games are coming out that are cross generation right now. And it's like usually okay, the first year that the console comes out, you can understand that a lot of people still have the last console. Not a lot of people have the new one, and developers are still learning how to make games to optimize this new hardware that they have. But we're 2 years in now, and PlayStation console supply is still just catching up to the demand for it. So yeah, I mean, maybe we still have 2 more years until the supply meets the demand. And maybe we still have 2 more years until developers are really able to take advantage of the hardware, whether it's, the straight up hardware for the console itself, or even look at the controller hardware, all the adaptive triggers and the HD rumble and all this stuff that PlayStation has built into the controllers that developers don't really use.
Yeah.
Not to mention, we're just about to get the PSVR 2 next year in like a few months, right? So if we get all of that, and then what? It's essentially 3 years of them, I guess, like hitting their stride, if we want to say, right? That doesn't really make any sense. They'd almost be like hamstringing themselves, right?
Hmm.
So, 10 years sounds more reasonable to me. As you mentioned, like the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 having a 10-year cycle, that seems more reasonable. Maybe, 2 more years to build up your supply chain and developers can finally get a grasp on the system. And then that's like a 6-year cycle. And at some point, I could see maybe in 3 more years them coming out with like a PS6 Pro or Xbox Series X Pro or Slim or whatever you want to call it. Some sort of solid console revision.
Hmm.
Because up until now, there's just been like little mini revisions of we can make this, a little bit cheaper. We're using a little bit, lighter of a heat sink material. I could see them doing that stuff over the next 3 years and then fully revising the console without doing a reset or a next generation. But yeah, 7 years seems pretty quick, at least right now. But I guess let's say whenever they do come out with the console, whether it's 2027 or 2030, PlayStation has already confirmed they're coming out with a console. My questions around the console, I guess. Do you think they bother making a disc version, or is it just straight digital version? And two, do you think Xbox comes out with a console at that point too, or by that point is it we've just fully committed to Game Pass? We are no longer doing consoles. Cellular service and Wi-Fi and game streaming is so good now that anyone can do it on their phone. We are not going to bother putting money, research and development into a console. We're just focusing on Game Pass now.
So for the second question, originally, and this is going to be me saying, yeah, I was absolutely wrong. Originally, I thought this was going to be the last physical like Xbox generation,
Mhm.
and that could still very much happen, especially if this generation is prolonged. But the reason why I'm gonna go back and think I do think there's going to be a sequel to the Xbox Series X and S is the fact that video game development is very difficult, and it's only gotten more difficult these past few years. And Microsoft has a lot of games that are announced that I wouldn't be surprised if don't come out until after 2030. Games like the next Fallout, which is, right now Bethesda's working on Starfield. They're supposed to be working on Elder Scrolls 6 right after this, which I imagine probably won't come out for another 3 years or so. And then after that, there's going to be a Fallout game that they're going to work on, which will probably be another 3-4 years after that. So, I would imagine that they have games coming out that will probably have to be on a next gen console. And that doesn't even include a lot of the stuff that CD Projekt Red, which is obviously a third party studio, but they've announced, hey, we're going to have a new Witcher trilogy coming out. There's going to be a Cyberpunk 2 coming out. And, that's a lot of games. It's not all going to be on this generation. And for the PlayStation question, yeah, I think for the same reason, they're going to have a disc version because, the whole idea of why I think this generation is going to be longer is that there's just going to be a long tail for people to actually get into this generation. The reality is it's still very difficult to get a PlayStation. I shouldn't say very difficult. It's still kind of difficult to get a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox. And even for someone like me who has thought about potentially getting an Xbox and kind of wants one, it just financially doesn't make any sense right now. And I think there's a lot of people in both of those camps that maybe in the next 5 years, it does make sense for them to get an Xbox, or it does make sense for them to get a PlayStation 5. And for them, the generation is just going to be starting. And I think in terms of the video game development side, it's just going to be starting for the games as well in terms of full-on exclusives to this gen. So yeah, I do see that the next version will have a disc on the PlayStation 5. Maybe it's kind of reversed where the digital version is the more manufactured version and the disc version is a little bit more niche, which is the opposite of what it is now. It's very hard to come across on all digital PlayStation 5, but the disc version is their main SKU. Maybe they change that around so that they can get more revenue from the digital game sales. But yeah, I definitely think both of them will have consoles with discs in the next generation. Do you?
I think PlayStation will.
Okay.
I think Xbox won't. I think I agree with you. I think both consoles will definitely shift more towards. Yeah, I think they'll shift to digital only consoles.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think Xbox is gonna lean very heavily into Game Pass, and I mean, why wouldn't you? It's so successful. It's
Yeah.
ridiculously successful, and people love it. I think they. I think they'll still make a console with a disk drive, just for like the boomers, for the people who love collectibles and love digital edition, or not digital, who love collectible editions and special editions with steel cases for their games. I think they'll still make it because I think that's a decent market for them too, right? It's essentially the same game and you can sell it for like twice the price just because you're giving someone a steel case, and I mean you're downloading the game from a disc anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference. But I think yes, there will be discs. I think PlayStation will be 50-50.
Mm.
I think right now they've actually started to shift more to digital consoles because they do those bundle packs. Like, we just had God of War come out. That's a bundle pack. That's digital only. We had Horizon Forbidden West come out. That was also a bundle pack that was only digital too, where you get the console and you get the game installed on it already. So I think as this generation moves on, I think we're going to see PlayStation definitely do that a lot more. When their big games come out, hey, it's a whatever bundle, the GTA 6 bundle. And yeah, I think they're going to shift more to it's a GTA 6 bundle, diskless version only. It comes installed on the game. But I think the next generation, I don't think we're done with disc drives yet. I hope not, at least. I'm still a boomer. I still like collecting physical CDs for, I don't know, whatever reason. I wish we could all go back to cartridges too, but it's probably not going to happen. My question for you that I bring it up, do you think we get the next generation consoles before we get GTA 6?
No. I think GTA 6 from those leaks looks pretty far along. I kind of expected it already to come out. I think I've said on this podcast I thought it was going to come out in 2020. Clearly not the case. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if GTA 6 is not as far away as people generally think, because a lot from those leaks, although a lot of people thought that the game looked bad in terms of animations and graphics and stuff like that, what I was shocked by is the backbone of that game looked done. It looked like, no, we know what this game is. We got our story. We got our city down. We got the physics of the game down. Like all the I want to say hard work in quotes because I don't know anything about making video games, but what I would imagine is the hard work looks like it's done, and now it looks like we're in those like finishing year or year and a half of that game. I wouldn't be surprised if that game comes out sooner than most people think.
Nice. Any closing statements for today?
Just a couple of things I want to mention based on that comment you made about the digital editions. First of all, companies need to stop with this digital edition foolishness and this collector's edition specifically, where you get the collector's edition but there's no game. Like, I don't know who thought that was a good idea. They're like, oh, well, what about people who buy the digital version? Then make a different SKU. Collector's editions should come with the game. The fact that they don't now is really dumb. And also, I just want to give a quick shout out to Game Freak, the creators of the Pokemon series. They're getting destroyed right now with the release of their newest Pokemon game, Scarlet and Violet. And the way that game was released, it's very buggy. It's very not good. And I'm sure they're not feeling great about a lot of the comments that have been talked about that game. But I do want to say the overall kind of impression of that game is that the game is great, despite the fact that it's buggy. It's probably one of the best Pokemon games since maybe Sun and Moon, maybe even since Gold. People are really loving it. But I also want to give them a shout out for releasing 2 games in 1 year with a studio size of less than 150 people or around 150 people. That's insane. Like, that's, first of all, I'm sure these guys are overworked. And overall, that's probably not an excuse for the condition that the game was released in, but I definitely want to throw some empathy out there of like, hey, this is a small development team that in today's gaming market released 2 games in the span of 12 months, which is just unheard of. Mm-hmm. So shout out to them.
Didn't it also set records for Nintendo?
Oh yeah, 10 million copies sold in 3 days. Yeah. So yeah, maybe they're not too sad.
Yeah, some bad reviews, but also 10 million copies in 3 days.
And for context, the best-selling PlayStation exclusive, God of War, sold 5 million copies in a week. So yeah, that's the fastest-selling game that they've released. So yeah, this is a success beyond success in terms of 10 million copies in 3 days. But yeah, still, I'm sure they're not happy about the condition of the game.
Yeah. Well, they'll cry over all their money bags. Take it easy, everyone in podcast land.
Catch you in the next episode.